record button. So if you don't want yourself seen on the camera, feel free to push the button to stop your video. So first of all, again, thank you for joining us. We're very pleased to offer this presentation. This is part of the NAECC Spring Lunch speaker presentation. We titled it Indigenous Connections to Indiana, and we are very pleased to host a number of different tribal representatives coming from across the country. Today, we do have representation from the Pokhagen Potawatomi. We also, in April, will be featuring the Shawnee People. We'll have Chief Ben Barnes joining us, as well as cultural specialist, tribal preservation officer, Brad Barnes. I always get their names kind of mixed up, but they'll be both joining us in April. So we'll have information coming out about that in the near future. For those of you who don't know me, thank you again. My name is Felika Ahastin Bryant, and I'm the director of the Native American Educational and Culture Center at Purdue University. And we are pleased to host our speaker, Mr. Marcus Winchester. He is the director of language and cultural programs with the Pokagon and of Potawatomi, and I will go ahead and I usually do my land acknowledgement, so let me go ahead and do that first. I'm kind of skipping around here, but first of all, again, the purpose is just to bring awareness to the land which we stand upon, and we're very pleased that we have Marcus here. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but we want to acknowledge that Purdue University is built upon the indigenous lands of the Pokagon or the Potawatomi, the Shawnee, the Myaamia, and the Delaware, and we also recognize that there are additional tribal nations out there that are no longer have their footprints here in Indiana, but we do want to acknowledge their contributions. And we do see, and I always challenge people, you know, when we have a large group here, so if you would like to, you know, put into the chat box, tell us which land you're coming from or who were the original people from the land where your home is at. So feel free to do so. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. Marcus is going to talk with us to talk about the Pokagon Potawatomi and their connection to Indiana. And afterwards, we're going to open it up to some questions. So if you have any questions, I would encourage you just if you want to put them in the chat box, and we'll come back and we'll answer those questions. So I'm going to go ahead and officially turn it over to Marcus. So again, thank you for joining us, Marcus, and the floor is yours.
Hey, Miigwech, thank you for having me, and Miigwech, everybody, for joining in and spending your lunch hour here. So before I get going, I'm gonna introduce myself and my language. So Buju, Jayet, Ginwa, Marcus Winchester, Indigenous Bodéwadmik, Odawa, and Dao, Jikwe, and Dodem, Cowater, Michigan, Doch, Bia, Bawatik, and Dada, Horopi. What I just said was, hello everybody, my name is Marcus Winchester. I told you that I come from the Potawatomi and Odawa nations. Next thing I told you is that I come from the Thunder Clan. And so I need to explain that a little bit. In Potawatomi culture, everything is organized through the clan system. All of our government functions, all of our military functions, everything that you can think of that a nation needs to have in place in order to be a resilient people that takes care of themselves. We managed all that through our clan system. So my duties and my responsibilities to my tribe, to my people, to the Potawatomi people are that of the Thunder Clan. And you get your clan from your father's side. So my father's father, all the way back to the beginning of the clan system was Thunder Clan. After that, I told you that I'm from Coldwater, Michigan, but I currently live at the place of the rapids. And so the place of the rapids is called Niles, Michigan. So my whole life, I have lived about 10 minutes north of the Indiana border. Coldwater was about 10 minutes north over by Angola, Fremont, if you guys are familiar with that part of Indiana. And then now I currently live just 10 minutes north of South Bend, and that's where Niles is located. So I've been in what we call Michiana my whole life, except for when I was at undergrad. So I'm happy to be here, happy to talk about Potawatomi people, in particular the Pokhagen band of Potawatomi Indians. Eja Mikchewian Eja Bodéwadmik. I just told you that I work at the place where they speak Potawatomi. I work in the Department of Language and Culture, and I serve as the director there. And so we try to make sure that our community has opportunities to maintain our Potawatomi language, culture, and history. And we also take opportunities like this as well to share our culture and our history with you fine folks. So like I said, I'm Potawatomi. The real way to say that is Bodéwadmik, Bodéwadmik, and what that means is the people of the fire, the people are the keepers of the fire. And what that refers to is the Potawatomi. We have another word for ourselves. We call ourselves Bodéwadmik, but we also call ourselves Nishnabé. And what Nishnabé means is the people or the human beings. And so there's two other tribes here in the Great Lakes area of the Midwest that also call themselves the Nishnabé. So that would be the Ojibwe and the Odawa. But they say it differently. They say Anishinaabe. So you might be able to hear those slight differences, Anishinaabe versus Nishnabé. So the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi, or the Bodéwadmik, collectively, we consider ourselves Nishnabé people, the original people, the human beings of Turtle Island, or North America. And so the Ojibwe, we had a duty to ourselves. We called ourselves the Three Fires Confederacy, the Odawa, the Ojibwe, the Bodéwadmik. The Ojibwe had a responsibility to the Confederacy, and that responsibility was to be the keepers of the tradition, to keep the traditions alive. The Odawa, their responsibility was to maintain and organize the trade system that we had here in the Great Lakes area. And then the Potawatomi people were responsible for maintaining our council fires. And the way that I interpret that is, we were responsible for our councils and when we would come together and having those relationships. So there's keepers of the fire in that regard, for the councils and coming together and our three tribes making decisions together. But it also deals with our internal fire that we all have, our spirit. And so the Potawatomi, I've also heard as a teaching, was that as keepers of the fire, we were responsible for maintaining the spirituality of the tribe as well. Just something else I heard, fun fact for you. But those are the three tribes from the Great Lakes area, Bodéwadmik, Odawa, Ojibwe, primarily in Michigan, but in particular, the Potawatomi people, the Bodéwadmik, we were the furthest south of those three tribes. And we lived and settled along southern Lake Michigan. So when the Potawatomi historical territory was at its peak, when we were militarily and economically and politically dominant in this area, so that would have been pretty much the entire 1700s. We were the dominant nation in this area. Yes, we were more dominant than the United States, France, and Great Britain. During that time period, the Potawatomi Nation occupied all of southern Michigan, northern Ohio, all of northern Indiana, northeastern Illinois, and southern Wisconsin, going on up into Green Bay, the Door Peninsula. That's all original Potawatomi territory. And so I'm gonna share real quick with you the story about my tribe and our history to Indiana. I'm sure, as many of you are well aware, despite the name of Indiana and the state's capital, Indianapolis, there are no more federally recognized tribes in the state of Indiana, with the exception of my tribe. The Pokagon Band of Potawatomi Indians is the only tribe that is the only federally recognized tribal nation that has trust land inside the state of Indiana. So we're the only one that the state of Indiana deals with, but as you guys have heard by listening to the Myaamia, and you guys will meet one of my friends, Ben, and with the Shawnee, and you'll find out that those are historical tribes, and they have land in Indiana, but it's not federal trust land. It's private land that they own in that regard. And so the privileges of it being sovereign tribal land aren't there. We have those privileges as Pokagon Band of Potawatomi. We have land in South Bend, Indiana, that is our sovereign land that the state of Indiana has no say over. And unfortunately, the Myaamia and Shawnee do not have land like that in Indiana. But that was a huge tangent to tell you that the Pokhagen Band of Potawatomi are the only federally recognized tribe in the state of Indiana, and I'm going to share that story of why. So I mentioned that the Potawatomi had originally settled all along southern Lake Michigan. That's our original territory. But as we know, President Andrew Jackson signed Indian Removal Act in 1830. And what the Indian Removal Act said was that any Native American living east of the Mississippi had to be relocated west of the Mississippi. So obviously the Potawatomi tribe nation falls within that group. And because of that, a lot of the tribal communities, the Potawatomi communities, responded to American removal differently. And so here's our story and how we responded to removal and why we're still in Indiana and why the other Potawatomi aren't. So as early as 1795 at the Treaty of Greenville, Ohio, the Potawatomi went to that treaty signing, and that treaty was to sign away pretty much all of Ohio and a eastern sliver of Indiana, the Treaty of Greenville, Ohio in 1795. And so as a part of that agreement to sign away that huge chunk of land, the tribes that went to that signing, the Potawatomi, the Odawa, the Ojibwe, the Myaamia, the Shawnee, the Peoria, and many more that I'm forgetting off the top of my head. When the tribes went to that treaty negotiation, they said, in exchange for our land, we want money, we want goods, we want gifts, we want you to send a carpenter to build us stuff, we want you to send a blacksmith, we want you to send a teacher. We expect you to give us all these things in exchange for our land. And that was put into those treaty negotiations as far back as 1795. And that was a tactic that our Potawatomi leaders, in particular, the St. Joseph Potawatomi, that's something that I forgot to mention. I'm from the Pokhagen Band of Potawatomi Indians. We descend from the villages that historically lived along the St. Joseph River of southern Michigan and northern Indiana. There's a pretty prominent river here in the Michiana area that runs through both states, and our villages were all along that river. So the St. Joseph Potawatomi that went to this Treaty of Greenville in 1795, what they told the government officials at that treaty signing was, we want all these things. We want you to accommodate us, and we want you to bring these different European, Euro-American cultural modes into our village so we can incorporate them. And the mindset there was the Potawatomi at this point in time, the St. Joseph Potawatomi in particular, were sick and tired of fighting. We were in the French and Indian War. We were in Pontiac's Rebellion. We were in the American Revolution. We were in the Beaver Wars. We were in all those conflicts. Some of them were successful, some of them weren't. Some of them we reaped huge benefits, some of them we didn't. But at the end of that, after 100 years or so of fighting and fighting and fighting, you get tired of it. And so that's what the leaders in this region decided, is that the best way that we can have influence over this large influx of these Europeans coming into our home, rather than fight them, let's do everything within our power to manipulate that process and have influence over that process and try to leverage some success from this process of all these Euro-Americans coming into our land. And so that's what that treaty negotiation was. They said, we're gonna ask the US government to teach us how to read, how to write, how to fix, do our own repairs with steel, do all these different things, because the idea was we're gonna pick and choose from these European American cultural things, and we're gonna incorporate it into our ways, so that will give us an upper hand when these Americans get here in larger numbers, and then we can have influence over that whole process, and we can you know, make things happen in our benefit. And that was the plan. Well, that didn't work. As in Treaty of Greenville in 1795, the United States fell through on all of their promises. A lot of the money that was promised to us for our land got pocketed by military officials. A lot of the livestock that was promised to us was never delivered. Just all the promises fell through. The treaties weren't honored. So this made a lot of people angry. In particular, it made a Shawnee leader by the name of Tecumseh really angry and upset. He has a very controversial story. I'm really interested in what Ben is going to share with you guys, and if he's going to touch on Tecumseh at all, because Ben is from the Shawnee people, and Tecumseh was Shawnee. But I'm going on a tangent. So Tecumseh, he was a Shawnee warrior and leader from the same time period. And like I said, the Shawnees signed the Treaty of Greenville as well. And they requested the exact same things from the United States government as the Potawatomi people did. And just like with the Potawatomi, the United States government did not follow through on their promises to the Shawnee people. So this made the Shawnee people mad as well, just like it made the Potawatomi people mad. But if you think about where the Shawnee are located, they're right on that border buffer zone where the United States was just formed and Indian land starts. So we're talking along the Ohio River area. We're talking over by Kentucky, Southern Ohio, Southern Indiana, this big, huge region down there. That was traditionally where the Shawnee were. So the Shawnee were facing the worst blunt interactions with the early American settlers. The American settlers were not paying attention to the treaty boundaries and were squatting on Shawnee land and starting trouble with the Shawnee. And the Shawnee needed to be able to provide for themselves, and they had to go outside reservation boundaries to hunt and harvest and do what they needed to do to protect their families. And so that process created a lot of confrontation between the early Americans and the Shawnee. Tecumseh organized rebellion amongst all many Native American nations at that time period. And what Tecumseh wanted to do was unite as many tribes as he could, unite as many nations as he could, get an army together of Native American tribes and fight the United States, kick the United States out, and bring back Great Britain. That was Tecumseh's plan, because Great Britain was way nicer to the Native Americans than the newly founded United States of America was. And Great Britain were our homies. We just helped them out in the American Revolution. And so that seemed like a good process to go, because the United States of America was not no good. Interactions weren't going good. And you know, we need to kick the United States out. That was the mentality. So when Tecumseh went on that campaign to try to get as many tribes as he could to back him up, he went to the Potawatomi for sure. And when he got to the Potawatomi, he got a lot of support. I think the Potawatomi from Illinois and some of the Potawatomi from down by your guys' way, over by Prophetstown, and the Potawatomi along the Wabash River. He got a lot of support from those Potawatomi. He did not get support from the St. Joseph Potawatomi, the Potawatomi that I descend from. That's not to say that there weren't warriors that went and fought for him, but by and large, our leaders said, we're going to stay out of it, because we know that the United States government fell through on their promises. We know that they're not the good people that they say they are, and they're going to continue to screw us over, but we have faith in our process. We have faith in our method, and we still think that the best way to deal with the United States is to have influence over them rather than try to fight them. So good luck, but you know, we're not going to join you, because in their mind, they knew that Tecumseh was going to fail. They knew that when Tecumseh failed, all his followers were going to go back to their villages with the tail between their legs, and the United States was going to have the upper hand to come in and swindle more land away from the Potawatomi people, and therefore shrink the Potawatomi nation's land base more and more and more. And that's what the St. Joseph Potawatomi did not want to happen. And that is exactly what happened. Tecumseh was killed at the Battle of Thames in 1813. So that's the Thames Valley of Southern Ontario is where he was killed in 1813. And all of the Potawatomi leaders and all the Potawatomi people, the warriors that followed Tecumseh in the battle, they went back home to their villages in Illinois and Indiana, and they went back with their tail between their legs. And the United States took full advantage of it, just like the St. Joseph Potawatomi leaders had predicted. And more Potawatomi villages started signing away their land willingly over to the United States in exchange for land out west. Because you got to think, these Potawatomi that just followed Tecumseh into battle against the United States clearly want nothing to do with the United States. So if you get a government official coming to your village saying, we'll give you money to move, and we're going to give you the supplies to move, and we're going to give you that land to move, and we promise to stay out of your hair, you're darn right some of those Potawatomi were like, sign me up, we don't like you guys, get us far away. And so a lot of Potawatomi did willingly move out west to get away from European Americans. Some Potawatomi did not want to go that route. Like I said, the St. Joseph Potawatomi, the Potawatomi that I descend from, they wanted to stay in the area and live in our villages along the St. Joe River. We didn't follow Tecumseh. A lot of Potawatomi started signing away land. Our Potawatomi territory started dwindling and dwindling. So then that gets us to the point of the early 1820s. By this time, a decade had passed after Tecumseh was killed. And I say all those things not to disrespect Tecumseh in one bit. I look up to him. What he was able to accomplish was tremendous. So I don't want to give the impression that I'm speaking ill of Tecumseh in one bit. So come the early 1820s, we enter into another treaty with the United States, the St. Joseph Potawatomi do. And this is the first Treaty of Chicago in 1821. And as a part of this treaty, the Potawatomi said, we're going to try that tactic that we tried at the Treaty of Greenville. We're going to try it again. We're going to request money. Well, they've been requesting money the whole time, but they said, we're going to request a blacksmith. We're going to request a missionary, a school teacher, cabins, livestock. We're going to request all the stuff for our villages. Again, the mindset is we're going to use American culture against America to give ourselves leverage so we don't have to be forcibly removed. That was the tactic. That was the plan. So as a part of that treaty, we finally had some of those promises followed through with. And what ended up happening, long story short, we had a guy by the name of Isaac McCoy come to our one of our villages that we had along the St. Joseph River, and he established a mission called Carry Mission. And that mission was not very successful. It was not what the Potawatomi wanted. I was talking to a historian, and he said he was reading first-hand documents of old settlers that wrote diaries that visited Carey Mission when it was still established. And in those journals, they talk about how Isaac is mismanaging the place, how the people that he contracted to build the cabins for the Potawatomi were so poorly built that if the wind blew hard enough, the fires would blow out inside the cabins. The livestock at the villages were malnourished. Nobody was attending school. So it was not what the Potawatomi had wanted or hoped or aspired to. So eventually the Potawatomi had enough of Isaac and his mismanagement of Carey Mission. So the Potawatomi leaders put their thinking ability, their thinking caps together. And the ultimate decision was, we're going to fire Isaac and hire somebody new to come in to replace Isaac because he's doing a terrible job. So what ended up happening was one of our leaders, his name was Leopold Pokhagen. And what Leopold Pokhagen, he's the namesake of our tribe, and this is why. Leopold Pokhagen walked from his village, which is, I don't expect any of you to be familiar with South Bend, but if you are familiar with South Bend, there's a county park here named St. Pat's Park. And that is where Leopold had his village, was right there. So it's right on the Michigan-Indiana border. So Leopold walked from his village over here by South Bend and walked all the way to Detroit, Michigan, to the Detroit Catholic Diocese. And he met with Father Gabriel Richard. And Leopold went to Father Gabriel Richard and told him about the situation with Isaac at Carey Mission and requested that Father Gabriel Richard send back a Catholic replacement. Father Gabriel Richard was not interested, wanted nothing to do with it. Said, sorry, sorry about the beef you guys are having, but don't bring me into it. The old story goes is that Leopold drops to his knees and he starts reciting old prayers, I guess you would call them. And when it was translated, what he was deciphering, or what he was praying about, it blew Father Gabriel Richard away, because what Leopold was reciting were old prayers that the Potawatomi had learned from the Jesuits at Fort St. Joseph 100 years prior, when the French fur traders first came to the Indiana, Michigan area here on the southern Lake Michigan. And so that blew Father Gabriel Richard away, said, all right, you got it. I'm going to send back a black robe. So he sent back somebody by the name of Father Stephen Baden. So Isaac McCoy had gotten wind that Stephen Baden was going to come replace him at Cary Mission. And Isaac did not want this to take place. He actually enlisted some of the local militia to stop this from happening. And basically the Potawatomi and Isaac had a conversation and said, you're fired. You don't got to go home, but you can't stay here. And Isaac said, no, this is my mission. And the Potawatomi leader said, no, this is our mission. You work for us. You're fired. Isaac said, no, I built this place. I manage this place. It's mine. I'm not going anywhere. Went back and forth, back and forth. Finally, Leopold said, enough, I've had it. Father Baden, you can establish a new mission at my village, because Cary Mission was kind of a far distance from where Leopold's village was at. So they went down to Leopold's village, established a Catholic mission at Leopold's village, and it was very successful. Everything that the Potawatomi had ever hoped for and dreamed for was Father Baden at Leopold's village. A number of people converted to Catholicism. There were a number of Potawatomi children attending classes, learning how to read and write. Their European-style gardens were successful. For whatever reason, America wasn't happy with the way that we planted gardens, even though we're the ones that invented corn and squash and beans and all that. They told us we had to garden a different method, according to Europeans, with rows and plows and whatnot, because that's not how we gardened. Anyways, that was one of the things that the mission was supposed to teach the savages, how to garden their crops in a civilized manner and all this types of stuff. So it was a very successful mission. And it was everything we wanted. In the meantime, people like Isaac McCoy, these dirty rascals, people like Isaac McCoy, they're writing letters to our lawmakers in Washington, D.C. And what these letters are saying is that, hey, I'm Reverend so-and-so, and I run such and such mission for this group of savages. And these savages are just so wild and barbaric and incapable of anything. They're a bunch of heathens. They're drunks. They can't learn how to read and write. They don't know their left from their right. They're always fighting. They're lazy. They can't figure out how to garden properly. They can't live side by side with Europeans. They don't know how to pay back their debts. These people are just really miserable. And if we really truly have the best of interest for these savages, what we need to do is round them all up and ship them out west and let them live in their own despair. So if we're really true good Christians, that's what we're going to do, so that they can live on their own, and we're out of their hair and they're out of our hair, and that's the best option. So those are the types of letters that people like Isaac McCoy are sending to our lawmakers in DC. And that is why Indian removal made its way through Congress, and Andrew Jackson signed it into law in 1830, where Indian removal required every Native American living east of the Mississippi to relocate west of the Mississippi, because at that time they were convinced that they were doing the good thing by relocating Native Americans west of the Mississippi for the purposes that I just laid out. And so that leads us to the Treaty of Chicago in 1833. And the Treaty of Chicago of 1833 was to remove the last of the Potawatomi from Indiana and Michigan, the last of the strongholds, those of us that didn't want to leave, because by this point, the Potawatomi communities had responded to American invasion in different ways. We either took the offers to relocate out west, we either went and hid out in the woods, primarily northern Wisconsin, to hide out. We either stood our ground and stayed here, or we crossed the border into Canada and just settled in Canada. That way we didn't have to deal with the United States altogether. Or we did a mixture of all four of those things. And so that's what everybody's trying to do. And so obviously the Pokhagen band of Potawatomi, the St. Joseph Potawatomi, our tactic is to, you know, be a stronghold, stand our ground. We're not moving. This is the land of our grandfathers, grandfathers, blood, sweat, and tears are on this land, and you ain't taking us anywhere. And so that's what mentality Leopold took with him to the Treaty of Chicago in 1833. So when Leopold went to that treaty negotiation, he told United States government officials that were there, you want to remove my tribe, the one of the last few Potawatomi villages in the area, you want to remove us from our homeland because you said A, B, C, D, and E. You said we can't do this, we can't do that, we're incapable of this and such and such. He goes, but if you look at my village, we're accomplishing all of those things and then some. And that's when the United States government officials said, you know what, you're right. So they made a provision in the Treaty of Chicago of 1833 that said Leopold Pokhagen and his band of Potawatomi were exempt for removal based on their religious creed. So it happened, it succeeded. What we had originally conceptualized back in 1795 at the Treaty of Greenville, Ohio, had matured and come to fruition at the Treaty of Chicago in 1833. The genius and the foresightedness and the great leadership of my ancestors and their ability to have the know-how that fighting Americans is going to be pointless, let's have influence over them and manipulate this process, was brilliant, because that's why I am still in southern Michigan, northern Indiana, and why I'm not out in Kansas or Oklahoma or in Canada somewhere. It was because of the genius of my ancestors, knowing that that tactic would work. And so that's how Leopold managed to keep his band, quote unquote, of Potawatomi from being removed. So here's the fun fact of the story. I'm towards the end. So I'm gonna wrap this up real quick. So what ended up happening is that the treaties actually said that Leopold had to remove his village up to northern Michigan. I don't know how many of you are familiar with northern Michigan, Traverse City type of area. That's where we were supposed to move to, way up north. But that's Odawa territory. Our brothers, the Odawa, the keepers of the trade. So when Leopold went up there to scout for land, the Odawa told Leopold that they too had just signed away the last of their land and they had nowhere for us to move. So, you know, sorry, you ain't moving up here. This land is ours. You know, we're not giving up the little we have. So Leopold had to come back down to southern Michigan, northern Indiana. And what he did is he collected the tribe's money that they had collectively acquired and held onto from the treaty annuities. A lot of it was his own money. And they took that money together and they bought land from the state of Michigan. And so this is the point where you see Leopold remove his village from what would become Indiana to what would become Michigan, or I think by this point it is the territory of Michigan. And he buys land from the state of Michigan at a place called Silver Creek, Michigan, and moves the entire village there. Father Baden in the Catholic Church did not want to move with us. Instead, they decided to keep their headquarters in South Bend and keep their operations there. Father Baden actually ends up leaving and he goes off to establish another Indian mission somewhere else. But there's several replacements that come in after Father Baden, maybe 2 or 3, but there's one firm final replacement that comes in to take over for Father Baden. And so during this process, Leopold moves his people from his old village in Indiana, moves them up 20 minutes north to Silver Creek, Michigan. And he ends up dying. And when he passes away, he was just in the midst of divvying up that communal land that he had just bought that was in his name. He was going to divvy it all up and give titles to the head of every single family. So when he died, Father Baden's replacement took it upon himself to tell the United States government, this group of Indians over here, their chief just died. And so naturally the next guy in line is his oldest son, and his name is Peter. So that's who you're going to work through now. So you're going to work through me and Peter. That's what Father Baden's replacement is telling the United States government. But that's not the case. Peter was not our next guy in charge. It was a guy by the name of Sinajwa. So that made everybody mad that this outside influence would tell the United States government on our behalf who our leaders are. And then to top that off, Peter, now that he has incorrectly been given authority, he decides that he's not going to divvy up the land and parson it out to every head of the family. So that makes everybody mad. And then on top of that, this is something where everybody's doing right now. We owe taxes every year. Native American, at this point in time, outlook on wealth and possessions is completely 180% opposite from capitalism. In Native American culture, the way that you show how rich you are is not by how much you acquire and accumulate, it's by how much you give. The most prominent, respectable people in the community were, by our standards today, were the poorest. And that's because they were always making sure that everybody was taken care of. And that process of taking care of everybody elevated you socially, your status, and you got more respect that way. So materially, you didn't have squat, but socially, and the amount of respect that was given to you was like way up here. So that was how we looked at material possessions. So nobody had money to just give to the state of Michigan to pay these land taxes because our wealth was redistributed into the community. Nobody was just sitting on a pile of money. So we had all of these things, all of these chaotic things going on that we were trying to figure out. And a lot of it had to do with Father Baden's replacement. So Father Baden's replacement was a guy by the name of Father Soren. And if none of you are familiar with Notre Dame history, Father Soren is the founder of Notre Dame. So that's the relationship of Notre Dame and why they are in the South Bend area and why Notre Dame is even an institution to begin with. It's because Leopold invited a Catholic presence to his village to establish a mission. The Catholics decided they liked the area, established a headquarters here. A couple years go by, they established an institution. And so that's the history there and the relationship there, and how we managed to stay in Indiana, and the proactiveness of our leaders throughout that process. So if you didn't get anything from my presentation, I hope that you understood that the common perception that is out there about Native Americans throughout the United States history is, oh, look at those poor Indians, we took their land, let's pity them and feel bad for them. And like I just told you, that is not the case at all with my tribe. We did not roll over, we did not let anybody swindle us. We took complete ownership of our destiny, and that's why I'm here today. And I live on the land of my grandfather's millennia prior. So that's my presentation. I hope you guys liked it. Maybe it got you thinking. And I always say I take great pride in not being a petty individual. So if I said anything that maybe challenged something that you hold dear and believe, or you have another interpretation of a historical fact to present or offer, I'm all game for that, because it just contributes to a greater knowledge at the end. So you won't hurt my feelings if you want to share or offer anything. So I'm done.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Marcus, for that. I really enjoyed the whole giving us a historical perspective. If you could maybe spend another 2 or 3 minutes just to talk about current contemporary, what tribe structure is right now. And I know that you do have a number of enterprises that are out there related to the gaming and how you've been able to open up. But if you could just give our audience just a little quick glimpse as to how things are operating now in current times.
So a quick glimpse, the best I can. We actually were not recognized by the United States government as a sovereign tribal nation until 1994. And that is for a number of different historical reasons that are mostly deal with red tape and bureaucracy and money. But we finally achieved our sovereign status in 1994. And for those of you that are not aware, being a tribal nation, what that means is the United States recognizes the story that I just told you. The United States recognizes that the Potawatomi nation is its own nation. We were our own people before the United States. We were our own people when the United States was trying to get formed. We were our own people while the United States was forming. Once the United States was formed, we were still our own people, and we entered into nation-to-nation agreements with the United States. And we're going to keep being ourselves. If the United States ceases to be anything, I'm going to continue to be Potawatomi into the future. That is who I am. That's my nation. Those are things that define who I am. So the United States recognizes sovereign tribal nations. And with that recognition of being a sovereign tribal nation, the United States gives federal trust status to Native American land. So what that means is on Native American land, tribal law supersedes. So local law, county law, and state law do not apply on tribal land. So that's why tribes can go after lucrative businesses on tribal land, because a lot of times those more lucrative businesses like gaming are regulated at the state level. And if the state has no jurisdiction on tribal land, well, there's an opportunity to make resources that can benefit our people. And so that's what the tribe does now. Like I said, we were recognized in 1994. That opened the door for us to pursue and exercise our sovereignty and take care of our people on our own terms. And we went on a business adventure and opened up a gaming enterprise, is the best way to put it, here in the Myaamia area. And because of that, that blew the doors open for the amount of resources that we can offer our tribal citizens. We have a tribal citizen base of about 6,000 people. We have what we call service areas or counties that we have identified in the Michigan, Indiana area where most of our citizens live. And that is 4 counties in the state of Michigan and 6 in the state of Indiana. And so that's where our citizen base is spread out. About 50% of our citizen base lives right here in the Wajak, South Bend area, and the other 50% lives elsewhere around the United States and the world. And so when I say we're a sovereign tribal nation and we exercise everything for a nation needed to be successful, I truly mean that. We elect a council that makes decisions for us. We have a police force, because our police force is the only force that has authority to enforce laws on our tribal land. We have our own tribal court, our own tribal judge. We have our own social services to take care of our elders. We have our own youth programs to make sure our youth grow up proud to be Potawatomi and know their language and culture and history. So we have all these different things. We call ourselves a nation, but just for comparison's sake, think of it as a municipality. So in the same way that your city provides services and resources to you, it's a lot in the same way that our tribe tries to provide resources to our citizens so that our citizens can have comfortable, fruitful, fulfilling lives and contribute back to the tribe and continue to the health of our nation. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, it did, and I think your tribal council, you operate as your leadership is run by a tribal council, and your chief is Matthew Weesaw, and so I guess that was the other point too, is just to let people know about the leadership and how that works. We do have a couple of hold on, sweetie, let me ask a question over here. Sorry, I have my niece over here. So we have a couple of questions in the chat box. I'm not sure if you've been able to look at them right now. So as we're going through, Rachel Gray is working to a group pushing to remove the name of the Harrison High School in West Lafayette, to remove the name Raiders. So I guess she just had some questions on there regarding any ways to help support that effort. So we can come back to that there. Let's see. Okay, Rachel, we'll come back to this here. So we have some specific questions related directly to his presentation, but we'll definitely circle back. Let's see, Shannon said, thank you so much. Kerry Rabenall, he is just asked the question about the relationship with Notre Dame, given that Father Soren was invited, as you mentioned, Father Soren was invited by Leopold Pokhagen to establish the, to come up into the in that particular area, and he is the founder of Notre Dame. can you elaborate on the special relationship you may have with Notre Dame?
Yeah, it's a large question to try to tackle, and I can try my best to answer it. I do know that relationship with the institution was a good one for a long time. A lot of our people continued to follow the Catholic faith and continued to frequent the campus and the university and St. Mary's, and there's a bunch of different little things around here in South Bend. We're here because of our village, and we maintain that relationship. As times went on, the university would allow our families to sell baskets at the university campus to try to make money. That was one of the ways that we made money, because we're no longer allowed to provide for ourselves the way that we knew how, hunting and harvesting, because it's all now private land. So we had to make baskets as trinkets to sell to tourists. So Notre Dame would let us do that, sell the baskets to different professors. I read somewhere just last month that it was a thing where Notre Dame actually would buy, we would make huge, like 3-foot deep black ash baskets, but they were laundry baskets that the Notre Dame housekeepers would use to do their laundry. So we had this relationship with Notre Dame, and it actually turned into a thing where they would give us holiday baskets in the winter, so to make sure that all the Potawatomi families had a good meal for their families throughout the holidays, and that became a thing, and that actually still occurs to this day. It all went down the drain in the late 1980s when a relative of mine got pretty confident and went into the Notre Dame administration and started demanding things, and that obviously offended them, and that kind of made a rocky path with Notre Dame after that, so I'm told. And here we are now 30 years later, and I guess that conversation has always been iffy since then. Like I said, Notre Dame still gives us food baskets, but they're not bending over backwards to try to partner with us on anything until more recently, with climate, or not climate change, but the social climate of everything going on now, and Notre Dame realizes that this is a huge elephant in the room that they shy away from, and they never tell their freshmen that part of the story. And so like the Potawatomi history at Notre Dame is completely absent. You wouldn't know it unless you deliberately ask somebody who knew. And so there's several professors there that are trying to change that, and I'm working with several of them. And so I'm trying to get it to a point where we have a very, very good mutually beneficial relationship with Notre Dame. And I said I'm trying to because of my position that has just fallen in my lap in the last year or so. So it's actually a very timely question.
Okay, great. Well, good luck with that. And he also mentioned about tuition. I know some colleges up in Michigan, they do offer, the state of Michigan, they have a law where they do allow Native students to attend universities tuition free, and those I think are primarily tribal nations that are from Michigan. So I'm not sure if you have that same relationship, given that you were saying that the Pokhagen history is not existent at Notre Dame. I'm not sure if you have any type of tuition remission for the tribal citizens there at Pokagon.
So on our side of that story, what we remember is that because we did all those things for Notre Dame a long time, and we also donated land for them to build their churches and stuff. So because we were so giving to the church when they first got here, I was told, and it's a story within our tribe, that they promised free tuition to any Potawatomi person for the rest of eternity. And Notre Dame has yet to act on that, and they claim that they don't remember that part of the agreement. So that is an issue, and that's something we're working towards.
Excellent. Thank you for that that information. Let's see, going down the list, Jill Newton, just kind of thank you for helping to better understand. And then Carrie's back with another question. Let's see, is Pokagon Potawatomi still doing ecological restorations along the Kanakaki River? Does this contribute to the traditional diet like wild rice and crafts like black ash?
So, yep. So the Pokagon Band of Potawatomi Indians in particular, our Department of Natural Resources, we they got pretty renowned about a decade ago for the work that they did just south of South Bend. So the Kankakee River or the Kankakee Marsh, if you guys aren't aware, that used to be what they would call the Everglades of the North. It was a huge expansion of wet marsh area, smack dab right where you guys are at. And they decided to completely drain it so that we could plant cornfields and whatnot throughout northern Indiana, and completely destroyed that marsh and all of the good things that came with it. But we acquired land in North Liberty. That's the name of the city. North Liberty. It's just south of South Bend. And it's right where the marsh would have started. And so we actually received a lot of grants and federal funding to restore the land that we bought back to marsh. And it was very successful. And the reason why it was successful is because it attracted a large number of migratory birds that had been extinct from the area. It brought them back. And so that's why it got so much attention. So the other part to the question was, how did that help Myaamia or wild rice? So for those of you who don't know, wild rice is a staple in our diet, and it grew in all the waters around here. But when the Europeans got here, they started messing up the ecology, and our wild rice went extinct because of that in the area throughout Michigan and Indiana. So we tried to replant wild rice at our North Liberty property. But if you remember, I just said we attracted a whole bunch of waterfowl. So the waterfowl would eat the rice before it had time to mature and we could harvest it. But that was a good question. I'm glad you know about that.
Okay, great. And then we just have Cindy, again, offering some gratitudes, as well as Shannon. So I think that we'll come back and circle to Rachel, but I just want to close out. We do have a couple of things I just want to share with you all. Let me see if I can. Oops, I'm not able to share. I also wanted to just bring this to everybody's attention, that the Pokhagen Band of Potawatomi has been an excellent resource for the state of Indiana. And recently we have an initiative to provide COVID-19 vaccinations to Indiana residents, Native American residents. So we're very happy to be working with the Pokhagen Band. And this coming Saturday, March 27th, we will be hosting a vaccination site in Indianapolis. And if there's an interest, we do have this all over our social media sites, as well as the Pokagon that has had a number of press releases that were issued. But we are working with the American Indian Center of Indiana, and if there's an interest, we encourage people to sign up in order to get their vaccines. And also, if you're able to list, we may be able to open this to family members as well, so I would highly encourage you to do so. Another item to share with you, we are working on a virtual tribal immersion program called Decolonizing the Southwest, and this is taking place starting next week. We're going to close off registration tomorrow, so if there's an interest in joining us, I will send this information to everybody here shortly. And then let me see, I had a couple of announcements to make. This is a very busy week. So this coming Thursday, the 25th, we are co-hosting the Native American Cultural Center along with the Center for the Environment, the Purdue Honors Club, the School of Interdisciplinary Studies, Asian American Resource Center, and some other organizations. I can't read that right now, but we are hosting an environmental justice, climate change, and racial justice symposium. So if you're interested, we have listed this in our NAECC newsletter, so feel free to take a look, and you're welcome to join us. We are another part of that particular event is on Thursday. I'm sorry, on Wednesday. Yes, Thursday the 25th. We are partnering with the to co-host a screening, Mothers of the Land is what it's called in English, and my Spanish is really bad, so I really can't just say that in Spanish, but we are going to have a screening discussion with the director. So hopefully you'll be able to join us for that. And then lastly, also on Thursday, we are partnering with the ARC, and we're going to be hosting in a session called Planting Stories. So we're going to be doing some planting at the NAECC as well as at the ARC. So feel free to join us for these events, and hopefully we'll be able to, help you in terms, if you're here to focus on a project or something of that nature, feel free to come and join us. So with that, I would like to just thank again Marcus Winchester for joining us. Our next session will take place on April 7th, where we will be featuring the same type of presentations focused on from the Shawnee people. Like I said, Chief Ben Barnes will be joining us for that at that event, as well as Tribal Preservation Officer Brad Barnes. So they'll both be here. We'll have information posted on our listserv as well as through our social media. So I'm going to go ahead and officially end this so we can stop the recording, and then we can come back to some additional questions. So thank you all for joining us, and have a good day.